The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
You know, we're up over 1,000% assaults on officers right now. And really just a lot of the talk that's out there, a lot of the rhetoric is just the violence directed towards law enforcement officers just trying to do their job.
Another ICE immigration facility attacked. The early investigation into who was targeted and who was killed in Dallas, Texas. And then the Southeast bracing for back-to-back tropical weather events. The warnings coming suddenly with a resurgent hurricane season. And then a warning to parents, the baby food that is being subject to an expanded recall due to exposure to lead. Good evening. I'm Taylor Murray. Welcome to the National News Desk, America's News Now. We are following breaking news this evening. The FBI is investigating a shooting at an ICE facility as a targeted attack on law enforcement. 3 detainees were shot this morning by a sniper at an immigration facility southwest of Dallas Love Field Airport. One of the victims has died. The others are in critical condition. The accused shooter is now dead after committing suicide before being found by officers there at the scene. And despite no law enforcement among the casualties, FBI Director Kash Patel shared this picture. Look at your screen. Bullet casings collected at the scene had the phrase anti-ICE engraved into them. ICE Director Todd Lyons told Fox News this afternoon it's clear the facility was a target.
The windows were shot out in the buildings. The lobby doors were shot, and he fired into an open area that just had no roof covering. The detainees weren't outside the vehicle. He was just firing at ICE vehicles. So it wasn't directed at the detainees. It wasn't directed at civilians on the street. It was a definite attack on law enforcement. He was there to attack that building.
The Department of Homeland Security also says this facility recently received a bomb threat as well. Last month, Bretton Dean Wilkinson arrived at the entrance and told officers he had a bomb in his backpack and a detonator on his person. He was taken into custody and charged with making terrorist threats. Well, it is becoming increasingly more dangerous for ICE officers to do their job. The Department of Homeland Security most recently reported a more than 1,000% increase in assaults against them. And the agency says assaults include vehicles being used as weapons toward federal officers and doxing. In some cases, even family members are now being targeted. Well, investigators say the motive of today's shooting is still not clear. It appears to be the latest in a string of politically motivated attacks across the country. The National News Desk, Kayla Gaskins, has a new look in the trend of these attacks that is changing the landscape of who is most at risk.
The windows were shot out in the buildings. The lobby doors were shot, and he fired into an open area that just had no roof covering. The detainees weren't outside the vehicle. He was just firing at ICE vehicles. So it wasn't directed at the detainees. It wasn't directed at civilians on the street. It was a definite attack on law enforcement. He was there to attack that building.
All right, here's a look at the Capitol in Raleigh, North Carolina, where lawmakers are sending new criminal justice reform measures to the governor's desk. It is in response to the stabbing death of Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska, who was killed by a man last month while riding public transportation. Now, the bill known as Irina's Law, if signed by the governor, would eliminate cashless bail for many crimes, limit some of the power of judges when deciding on pretrial release conditions, and also lays the groundwork for when offenders should be examined for possible involuntary commitment to a mental health facility. And the suspect accused of killing Irina is DeCarlos Brown Jr., and he had been arrested more than a dozen times and was released by a judge without any bond right before police say he murdered her. Brown is being charged with murder at the state and federal level. Well, there seems to be newfound support for Ukraine from President Donald Trump. As national correspondent Matt Galka reports, there's some cautious optimism that the new backing could lead to a breakthrough in Ukraine's war with Russia.
In a stunning shift, President Trump gave maybe his strongest endorsement of Ukraine's chances in the war with Russia, writing on Truth Social Tuesday. I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky admitted the change in tone surprised him.
He showed that he wants to support Ukraine to the very end. So we understand now that we are ready to finish this war as quick as possible.
It's a complete reversal of where the relationship between the U.S. and Ukraine seemed to be almost 7 months ago, when things boiled over in the Oval Office.
You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning.
The newfound support comes after world leaders have been speaking at the UN this week, with Zelensky warning the world Russia needs to be stopped immediately.
If it takes weapons to do it, if it takes pressure on Russia, then it must be done. And it must be done now. Otherwise, Putin will keep driving the war forward wider and deeper.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov at the UN. Trump also called Russia a paper tiger this week, fighting aimlessly in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin's spokesperson brushed off the insult.
Russia is certainly not a tiger. After all, Russia is more associated with a bear. There are no paper bears. Russia is a real bear.
President Trump has been very critical about how much money the U.S. has provided Ukraine, a number around $187 billion, according to the Department of Defense. But his statement this week said the U.S. would continue to supply NATO with weapons.
And Matt, we just saw in your story Ukraine's president addressing the UN earlier today. What else did he have to say?
Well, he gave a pretty stern warning to the rest of the world about security, saying the world is in the middle of what he called the most destructive arms race in history. He cited artificial intelligence and drones as destructive things that can form new weapons faster than humans can keep up, and urged countries around the world to take security measures now and take it seriously.
In Washington, D.C., Matt Galka, thank you. Well, if you have traveled to Europe recently, you may have noticed serious disruptions. Today, law enforcement officials announced they have arrested a suspect in a cyber attack that's wreaked havoc at multiple European airports since Friday. And some of the issues have been fixed, but Berlin's airport said it's still having problems. The suspect is out on bail and the investigation is ongoing. Here's a look now over the city of Memphis, Tennessee, where the timeline for deployment of federal troops is still unclear. In an order President Trump signed almost 2 weeks ago, Memphis could be the next city in his federal takeover. But according to Memphis newspapers, the exact date of the National Guard's arrival is unknown. President Trump has floated Chicago, St. Louis, Baltimore, New York, and New Orleans as targets for troops as well. Meanwhile, the National Guard is still ever present in Washington, D.C. In the southeast part of the nation's capital, some neighborhoods are seeing a shift away from law enforcement patrolling, but locals say boots are still on the ground just in another capacity, helping to pick up trash and even beautify the streets, something that the director of the D.C. National Guard says doubles as a crime deterrent.
So I think the presence does help, right? You know, when you see the National Guard, we kind of alluded to the uniform that we wear, it demands respect. I would argue and say that when the community does see us, whether we're armed or not, there has to be a level of respect that's given.
Still ahead, the items now included in an expanded recall of baby food that could contain high amounts of lead. Plus, a change in political dynamics in Europe is largely connected to one issue, where President Trump is urging European leaders to take action. Also on the way, a closer look at the medication the Trump administration says could help treat autism. Stay with us. We're back in 90 seconds. Right now, powerful waves from Hurricane Gabrielle continue to affect the East Coast from North Carolina northward. And life-threatening surf and rip current conditions at beaches are likely for the next day or so. Now, we are also tracking the newly formed tropical storm Umberto getting closer to the United States. Look here. Umberto is forecast to strengthen over the next few days, and a third Atlantic threat has an 80% chance of developing within the next week. Chief financial officers are weighing in on President Trump's tariffs. In a new survey from Duke University and the Federal Reserve Banks of Richmond and Atlanta, CFOs estimate inflation would have been about 30% lower this year on average without tariffs. That being said, CFOs become more optimistic about the economy from the second quarter to the third. Well, hundreds of dismissed federal employees are being asked to return to work, and this is by the General Services Administration. A former GSA employee told the AP the agency did not have the necessary workforce to carry out basic functions after the DOGE-inspired layoffs back in the springtime. Returning employees now have until October 6th to report back and return to work. And last month, the IRS, the Labor Department, and the National Park Service also rehired many of laid-off government workers. The craft store Michael's is bringing back the brand name for its former competitor Jo-Ann, the fabric store that went out of business. Michael's says its U.S. stores will have knit and sew shop sections with Jo-Ann signage, part of the company's new shop-in-shop concept. Michael's, of course, bought Jo-Ann's intellectual property earlier this year. Well, a baby food pouch recall expanding due to potentially elevated lead levels. Listen up. Additional lots of Sprout Organics 3.5-ounce pouches with sweet potato, apple, and spinach are now included. Now, they were all sold at Walgreens and other stores in multiple states and online. They have Best Buy dates of October 29th and 30th and December 4th, 2025 and February 4th, 2026. President Trump imploring European leaders to make changes or face dire consequences. Global migration is one of the key concerns. It's already been gripping voters across Europe, whom polls show are throwing their support behind candidates with populist messages once considered on the fringe. Here's national correspondent Christine Frizzell.
More than 100,000 people hit the streets of London this month, a group galvanized by two key issues.
Why is it important for you to be here today?
For freedom of speech, to hopefully stop the illegal immigration from coming to our shores.
There's nothing wrong with immigration, but illegal immigration is out of control. And we're losing our voice.
In his address to the United Nations General Assembly, President Donald Trump urged European leaders to change course.
If you don't stop people that you've never seen before, that you have nothing in common with, your country is going to fail. You're doing it because you want to be nice, you want to be politically correct, and you're destroying your heritage.
Those concerns for months now have been seeping into politics. Nigel Farage's Reform Party, once considered on the fringe, is surging in the polls, ahead of the ruling Labour Party and prompting some conservatives to jump ship.
The Conservative Party is over.
While national elections are still years away, similar trends are playing out across Europe, with the rise of the National Rally in France and the AfD Party in Germany, a movement supported by Elon Musk.
Fight for a great future for Germany.
The three biggest countries in Europe, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, in polls currently for the next major election, have a far-right candidate in the lead. That is, the word unprecedented is overused, but I think in this case it's absolutely accurate.
Professor Garrett Martin told me a major factor for those in these populist parties has been social media. As a result of being seen as outsiders, they weren't often invited to appear in the mainstream media, which forced them to be early adopters of platforms like TikTok and X. With now millions of followers, they've been able to get their anti-elite, anti-establishment message out far faster. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
Drinking alcohol may increase dementia risk. A new study in the BMJ Evidence-Based Medicine Journal analyzed data from hundreds of thousands of people. Those who reported drinking small amounts of alcohol had lower risk of dementia compared to heavy and, interestingly, non-drinkers. Researchers say the study does not prove alcohol causes dementia, but it is toxic to brain neurons. Eating certain fruits and vegetables can expose you to toxins. This is according to a new environmental working group study. It finds consuming a lot of produce with higher pesticide levels like non-organic strawberries may raise pesticide levels in your urine. The lead author says people can limit exposure by buying organic and by carefully cleaning produce before eating. Well, we have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America, and we start in Texas, where construction of a major AI data center is making progress.
Last year, President Trump made the largest investment in AI infrastructure, and it all started right here in Abilene. Now, political leaders and investors made a trip to the big country to see how Project Stargate is progressing.
Texas is ground zero for AI.
And companies like Oracle, SoftBank, and OpenAI are taking full advantage of the natural resources and low energy cost West Texas has to offer. The Lancium Clean Campus is in the process of constructing 8 5,000 square foot data halls, which brings at least 7,000 construction workers to the site daily.
Is literally just mint majesty tea with 2 honeys, and I drink like 9 of them a day. Otherwise, I lose my voice.
Autumn Perkins saw the posts about Charlie's favorite drink and how people were ordering it to memorialize him. So she decided to do the same when she went to this Kroger store in Middletown and walked up to the Starbucks counter. After getting her tea, Autumn looked at the cup within the cup, and she saw what the barista had allegedly written.
Racist fade drink.
What did you think?
Just shocked.
Autumn went to Kroger management. The statement sent to us says it all. The individual involved is no longer employed. This behavior does not reflect Kroger's values.
Well, South Carolina is one of 26 states impacted by a shortage of certified skilled trade instructors. Careers like electrical engineering are seeing a renaissance due to their high pay and steady work, making it hard to pull quality candidates away from those careers to teach.
Wages and salaries and benefits and per diems they're making on the job makes it very hard financially for them to come into essentially a job that pays scale.
According to the Charleston Electrical Training Alliance director, the needs are so great, companies like Google are offering grants to help those wanting to teach the trades. Well, coming up, what some states are doing to try to keep certain vaccines available in a break with the CDC's advisory panel. We'll be right back. A major shakeup to the current vaccine schedule for children is still waiting to be signed off on by the CDC. And even then, historically, public health authority resides primarily with the states, meaning states can choose whether or not to follow the recommendations. Now, the new guidance comes from the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIP, who last week weakened COVID shot recommendations and is no longer recommending a combination jab against measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox, or MMRV, for children under age 4. The National News Desk, Jan Jeffcoat, spoke this morning with Dr. Elizabeth Mumper, Senior Fellow of Pediatric Education with the Independent Medical Alliance, about vaccines and a possible link to autism.
The administration talked about listening to the parents because I've evaluated over 600 children with autism, and about 23% of the parents identified the MMR vaccine as a trigger to their child's regression. That doesn't mean that that's the only trigger, and correct. I just think that we need to take this very seriously.
Now, a growing number of states are issuing their own recommendations due to disagreements over the CDC advisory panel's guidance. New York has an executive order in place protecting the COVID vaccine for anyone who wants it. Also in the Northeast, 7 states have forged an alliance issuing guidance based on their own vaccine research. In similar fashion, on the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington, and Hawaii have all joined forces in the West Coast Health Alliance. Their first move, issuing a joint recommendation on COVID vaccination for children as young as 6 months old. Meanwhile, the pendulum swings in the opposite direction for Florida, which recently moved to eliminate childhood vaccine requirements altogether, a first in the nation. This comes as a drug used in cancer care is getting some new attention this week for an expanded use for autism. Medical reporter Liz Bonus explains how it works.
Hey there, everybody. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration now taking a closer look at a medication that can help folate reach the brain in certain patients with autism. It's called leucovorin, and a pill form of it may get new labeling for autism, potentially to help with speech.
It's helped in some children, but not all children.
Well, it's usually given IV to cancer patients to assist with chemotherapy or other drugs. Dr. Amir Miodovnik says that in autism, a small number of studies have shown the drug, which is a form of the essential B vitamin folic acid,
most of the studies have been in younger children, under 5.
May help get this nutrient into the brain when it's usually blocked.
In children who have these antibodies against the receptors that block folate into the brain, leucovorin can take a different route into the brain. So it increases the brain folate.
He says he would prescribe it to families who do want to try this option. The problem, however, is this.
Some children with autism do have these autoantibodies, but when they looked, so did the family members without autism. So it's not a clear, direct, explanation.
Now, one thing that has come up in all this is we do need to take a look at supply and demand of this drug right now. If it's needed more for autism, we may have a shortage then for cancer patients who need it for treatment. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonus reporting.
The White House issued a new health warning on Tylenol use for pregnant women. This comes as autism rates nationwide are skyrocketing, with nearly 1 in 31 kids diagnosed. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. Did you find any studies that discussed a link between acetaminophen and autism? Because worldwide, some health experts have been refuting that connection.
They definitely have. I dug into one of the studies that the White House referenced in their press release, and the study that I dug into said that the connection has to do with oxidative stress and hormone disruptions. So what does all that mean? Well, scientists think Tylenol might affect a baby's brain because it crosses the placenta and gets to the baby really fast. So once it's there, it can create toxic byproducts that stress developing brain cells, disrupt hormones needed for growth, and also interfere with key brain signaling systems. So this all coincides into that possible connection.
And others in the medical community, they have come out and disagreed with the White House guidance. Is that what most are saying? I know that you reviewed a wide range of data.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag from what I've read. There's definitely a lot of mixed opinions when it comes to this, and the mainstream medical community still believes that it's safe for pregnant women to take acetaminophen, but there are multiple studies showing associations between taking acetaminophen while pregnant and higher rates of autism or ADHD. But then at the same time, other experts in studies like the one you see on your screen say that those associations don't prove causation and could just be explained by other factors.
All right, interesting. Emma, thank you.
Thanks.
For more on this Fact Check Team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com.
Coming up, 3 newly launched spacecraft are heading to the sun to study space weather. Why their missions are so important, right after this. Separate missions to study space weather successfully launched together aboard a SpaceX rocket from Florida this morning. 2 spacecraft from NASA and 1 for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration are on their way towards the sun. The NOAA mission will provide crucial warnings on solar storms in an effort to protect vital infrastructure and national security. On its mission, NASA is also studying the heliosphere that covers planets in the solar system, including us here on Earth, from the cosmic radiation in the Milky Way galaxy. Called the Interstellar Mapping and Acceleration Probe, or IMAP, NASA will explore how solar wind is formed and how it interacts with interstellar space. Researchers hope to be able to predict oncoming solar storms more accurately. And here's a look at Roanoke, Virginia, where nearby at Virginia Tech University in Blacksburg, in a few minutes, Turning Point USA will be holding its next on-campus stop as part of their American Comeback Tour. Tonight's event features Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin as well as Megyn Kelly. The event begins at 6:30. Well, that does it for this edition of the National News Desk. Join us again at 10 p.m. tonight for a deeper dive into the rise in attacks at immigration enforcement facilities across the country. I'm Taylor Murray. Thanks for watching.